I think probably out of 100 questions, it's entirely possible for not one, the answer is, or at least should be, politicians. Don't get me wrong, there are questions for which it will and should be the answer. That is, politicians, the word politician should be the answer. That said, the number of questions should be quite small and the scope should be equally so. Hello and welcome to the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Monday, the 22nd of February of 2021. Glad to have you coming and joining us today, whether on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, or quite frankly anywhere else. Thank you for coming along. Subject of today's little discussion is going to be politicians are not the answer, or aren't the answer, as I put it in my little subject that I will put on the footer and so forth of this video. The thing of it is this. I don't really get why. Maybe somebody can answer this for me. But these days people seem to be stuck on the idea that politicians and politics can fix or solve anything and everything. You'll permit me to vehemently disagree. I do not agree with this idea, not at all. I'm not saying, again, that there's nothing for which politicians can be beneficial, but I am saying that the set of things is extremely limited. And I'm going to say this again. You're going to find this as a running course in the stuff that I do, right? In my opinion, where politics is involved in anything, it should be involved at the very lowest possible level. So most things politically probably should be being done on a city or a neighborhood sort of a basis. And then you should, where you have things that can't be done there, maybe they should be done on a higher basis like a county or state basis. And then the very least number of possible things should be being done on a federal, national sort of a basis. And a very, very, very tiny fractional amount of things should be done internationally in terms of political perspective. But the truth is, most things do not require politics at all. They don't require politics at all. They're not necessary at all. Not only are politicians not likely to solve many issues, but in trying to do so, it's a pretty good bet they'll likely make things worse rather than better. How many times have politicians said and done things that they thought were going to solve some particular problem or set of problems and either caused other problems or just not solve the original problem at all, or, who knows what else, right? 90% of the time when politicians try to propose solutions to things because they're not the people with the knowledge about those things, they propose things that are at best half-baked, and what ends up happening is people expect for them to have proposed something that's going to be good, meaningful, worthwhile, and so forth. And the things that they propose end up sounding good, but not being good. I put again in my notes, depending on the problem, both Republicans and Democrats are about as likely to make things less how you probably want them, rather than more, right? The reality is this. The first reality is this. If we work off of the idea that people in this country that the country itself was sort of born out of this idea of people being individuals, of people being their own man, their own woman, and that they didn't, for the most part, there wasn't any government, and they decided maybe we sort of need something in order to formalize certain things because there are people who will take advantage of the fact that they're not formalized if we don't. When you realize that the government was more or less an afterthought, that people came out and settled various places and lived in the places that they did, and that government was basically an afterthought. They didn't even have law enforcement, which is, one can argue, sort of one of the more important things, right? Unfortunately, there are some places that have, I'm going to step to the side for just a second, then I'm going to come back around. Unfortunately, there are some places and some people who've gotten bad reputations. Maybe they're deserving, maybe not. One of them is the John Birch Society. One of the things that the John Birch Society pointed out is that the reason lawmen were hired in many West westward bound expansions over the course of time was to make it so that people could concentrate on making a living and taking care of their families. It wasn't that they couldn't do what the lawmen were doing, it was that they didn't want to spend their time doing that stuff. They didn't want to have to sit and look after their property every moment of the day instead of being able to go out and plow the field and worry about coming back to a farmhouse plundered or in flames. They didn't want to worry about were their kids going to be safe from reckless, lawless individuals, so they hired people to take care of that job for them, and those people took that job on as a full-time thing. And that really is sort of the start of government. Well, the next step, obviously, is legislation, is writing laws so that when you worry about things criminal, you have some sort of formalized setup to do things. So that's not totally unimportant, but it's not really the most important thing in the world either. But here's the thing that's, well, okay, so then you go to the judiciary, obviously, where you actually have people who judge whether or not laws have been broken and what to do about it if they have. And then you go back essentially to the executive who deals with the manning of prisons and so forth, typically. So you've got the executive starting things by dealing with lawbreakers and so forth. You've got the legislative making decisions about who are and who aren't lawbreakers. You've got the judiciary in terms of the laws, and then you've got the judiciary actually deciding this person or that person in particular is or isn't a lawbreaker, right? But here's the thing. When it comes right down to it, all of that stuff was afterthought. All of it. Every bit of it was afterthought, okay? When people came out in society, they basically said, this is what polite society looked like. And most people agreed. Yeah, this is pretty much what polite society looked like. Some people wanted it to be a little politer than others. Some people wanted to be a little rougher around the edges. And you had, as a result, and you have this, you'll see this in societies literally around the world. You have stratification as a result of this, where there's one group who has their little tea rooms and their, dainty little finger up when they grab the teacup kind of an approach to life, and then you've got the people who are out there plowing the fields and planting tobacco or whatever to make it so that they can survive and do well for themselves. And I'm not saying that I am for or against any group where that's concerned. But what I am trying to get you to understand is the idea that politicians are the answer to your questions and your problems is not just a ridiculous idea largely, but it's something that back when you couldn't even do that, right? If you look at society in Europe for a long time, you would have these groups of people who are basically clans, and the clans would grow and grow and grow until they had a chieftain or something similar, right? And then ultimately, what would happen is there would end up being a conquering chieftain who took over a series of clans, and he would end up being a prince or a king, or however you want to look at that. And this was how that sort of thing was founded. Now, in the United States, we took a slightly different approach. Instead of assuming that the person dispensing the law was the person who ought to be in charge or responsible for everything, we decided that person was a servant to those people who put them in their positions of authority. But the problem is these days we've come to the conclusion that politicians are the answer to our problems. And let me make this as clear as I possibly can. No thing could be further from the truth. Politicians can do what they can do. It isn't really very much by comparison to what needs done. And lots of times, like I say, if you expect them to do things that are beyond their purview, they're going to try to do them, and they're going to do a bad job of it, and you're going to suffer the consequences as a result. Okay? You need to stop living in a world where you think that the politicians and other authorities ought to be able to tell you what you need to be doing with your life. I was watching somebody just today talking about how the politicians were saying, oh, things aren't going to get back to normal until after 2020 or in 2022, which the person said, no, they're not. That's not going to happen then if you continue to work like this. And he was right. It's not going to happen. Those people have decided that they like what they have, and they're going to continue to act in the veins that they are in order to keep those control, right? Okay. I need to go ahead and be done for the day because obviously I'm running low on time here. So I'm going to go, obviously I could talk longer, but I really feel like people need to have an expectation for me to try to live up to it. So that's what I've been trying to do. All right, so today is Monday, the 22nd of February, 2021. Tomorrow will be Tuesday, the 23rd of February of 2021, and I'm going to try and get out another daily summation then. Hope you're doing well today. We're starting to warm up here, and so, of course, the snow is melting, and most of it is gone from the roads and so forth, so it's not horribly, terribly hard to get around. Things are going well in my little world. I hope they're going pretty good in yours, and I hope that you will give me a like if you're on YouTube watching this, and you will give me a positive rumble if you're on Rumble and you enjoy it. Like I say, hopefully you enjoy it on on whatever platform you're listening to it or watching it on, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see you again tomorrow. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video is recorded on Monday, the 22nd of February of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.